Welcome to the Art Colony, a podcast about art and art history in Provincetown. My name is Gaston Lacombe. We've talked about the Fine Arts Work Center and how, when it was founded in 1968, one of the goals was to attract more artists to develop lifelong relationships with Provincetown. Well, for our guest today, this has worked. Over the last 6 decades, he has been linked to the Provincetown Art Colony as an artist, an educator, a curator, an arts administrator, and now also a resident. I was very lucky to have him as an instructor when I took a class in monotype printing at the Truro Center for the Arts at Castle Hill, and now I'm very happy to welcome him on my podcast. So everyone say welcome to Burt Yarborough.
Thanks, Gaston. It's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. So tell our guests, who is Burt Yarborough?
6 decades kind of scared me.
It's true, though.
Yeah, and I was counting the years. It's exactly 50 years this year since I came to Provincetown in '76. Who I am, I'm still trying to find that out myself. I think I think that's what we do as artists. It's a constant search, and fortunately it's been rich and fun. All of that, I think, kind of took place and has taken place in terms of self-discovery in Provincetown. Studied architecture and was in graduate school in photography. And then when I saw the application to the work center, which back then was a paper application, and it had this, it was about 8 by 12, and I was thinking of it the other day. It was all like test strips of beach grass. And that's the whole cover of the application. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. I opened it up and I saw the names, and one that stuck out was Jack Twerkoff, an artist whose work I had seen and whose work I'd admired. So, that set me on my way in the bicentennial year.
Oh, yeah.
76. Yeah, it was pretty amazing. When I got here, I had driven from Iowa City to Brockport, New York, stayed with a fellow graduate student, and then I drove to P-Town the next day. It was like 10 hours, and I got there. I was driving in at night, and I got to the Orleans Rotary, and it was pea soup fog. It was September because I was coming early to drop stuff off, and I just remember being the last 26 miles, the longest miles that I'd ever driven. It just seems like I was just kept going through fog and fog and fog. Yeah, so it was a very interesting evening all the way around.
So your origins then are in Iowa?
My origins are in Miami. I was born in Miami.
Oh, that's not Iowa at all.
No, it's not. That's why I felt so at home when I got to Provincetown. The next day I drove to Herring Cove, and I thought, I'm home. And that's what it felt like. Yeah, I grew up in Miami and went to school in South Carolina at Clemson University, studied architecture, and had a fantastic photography teacher that I took in my thesis year, the 5th year of architecture school, and changed my life. I had one of those artistic epiphanies when I picked up a camera. It was really extraordinary. And so I ended up applying for graduate school and got fortunate enough to get into the University of Iowa. So, and that was an amazing place. Again, it was the 60s. It was 1960, 69. And I got an MA and MFA. And after that, I had taught a year at LSU in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Again, a foreign country at that time, 1973. I was hired to start a photography program within the Department of Architecture, because I had an architecture degree. And that was a really intense and crazy situation. So I taught there for a year, and I said, if this is academia, I'm out of here, and went back to Iowa. And that's where I worked as a framer, did a bunch of stuff. And then I applied for the work center in 75, got rejected, applied the next year, and got in.
How had you heard about the Fine Arts Work Center?
Again, I saw this application. They were at that time, they sent out paper applications to graduate schools. And so a friend of mine showed me the application. I said, wow, this looks interesting. 7 months in Provincetown. I'd never been to Provincetown and didn't really know anything about it. Um, but I saw, 7-month fellowship where they gave you a whopping $275 a month and a place to live. Back then, we lived and worked in our studios.
Oh,
So
okay.
so I lived at the bottom of the barn, which I discovered had been where Motherwell and Frankenthaler had their studios. Um, so and back then, the stairwell, which is now exterior, was interior, and then there was the old original barn, and the bottom of the barn had 2 small bedrooms and a big open area and a kitchen. And so I had one for a bedroom, one for another little studio, and then I had a gigantic drafting table that I was able to purchase here. Um, and I set up another drawing table, and I had a big dining room table, so it was fabulous. I mean, and then what happened was I got introduced to the dunes, by a fellow guy named Chuck McCorkle, and I remember him taking me out to the dunes the first time on Fishpan Alley, which is, at the end of, Atkins Mayo Road. You cross Route 6 and Fishpan Alley, and it had all these fish pans stuck in it that were stabilizing the road. They were all rusted and everything, but it was a beautiful path out to the dunes, and I was just in awe. I mean, I'd never seen anything like it. Even in Miami, we didn't have dunes in Miami for sure, and in Iowa, it was corn and soybeans. So, it was fantastic, and we went all over the dunes, and then I remember we came back a different route, and I said to myself, "I've gotta figure all of this out. I've gotta," so, I started doing outdoor site-specific pieces in the dunes, and I did that for the entire 8 years that I lived here. I was lucky enough to get 2 years of fellowship, and then, the visual committee asked me to come on the committee and chair the committee, and, that was, the year after my fellowship. Back then, the visual committee was all local people. It was Jack Twerkoff, Peter Hutchinson, Jim Forsberg, Myron Stout, and all of these guys were amazing. And back then, if we had a committee meeting, they said, "Don't call us, just if we got any problems, give us a call." So, and fortunately, we didn't have too many problems, but we had some, and, but they were great. And I became, good friends, especially with Jack Twerkoff and Myron Stout, 2 amazing artists and incredible people, and then Jim Forsberg, Phil Mallicote, um, they were treasures. I mean, these guys started this place, helped, start it, um, along with Stanley Kunitz and Alan Dugan, and, they just believed that artists should come and have time, space, and support, and it's the idea, still exists. The idea hasn't been destroyed. Um, the fellows that are here now are an incredible group, a really great group of young artists doing really nice work. Um, the the whole facility, of course, has been upgraded and upgraded, and now it's like, it's as far as I'm concerned, it's luxurious. They've got beautiful studios, they've got, apartments that have been redone. It's terrific.
In 76, when you came here, what did it look like? Because right now we think of the Fine Arts Work Center, it's all, renovated and high technology, but I'm sure it was not like that in 76.
No, there's no digital, no computers. Everything was open. The office was open, and it moved into, a kind of a excuse me, a funky common room that had a fireplace. It's where we had potluck dinners every Friday night. Um, and then some of the artists and the committees and people and the board people, they all came to the potluck dinners. They were a lot of fun. They were crazy. Um, but yeah, there was no print shop. There were no what is now the Kunitz room and all those studios and things.
Which is like a little conference center.
Well,
type of thing.
it's a big, big kind of meeting space,
Yeah.
small auditorium.
That's the word, auditorium. That's the
Yeah.
word I was looking for.
And then the gallery is in, which is now Studio One. That's where the gallery was, the Hudson D. Walker Gallery. And then the gallery opened right into the offices, and everything was open. There was no, cubicles, nothing like what they have now. There was no gravel because it was all just dirt, and there was no print shop, and the studios were studios 1 through 10, all the way from the first building and into the second building, and underneath the second building, where it is now studios 7, 11, 12, 13, something like that, um, or an apartment 7, and then studios. Underneath was what was called the trap sheds. It's what, a lot of fishermen and other people kept lobster in the old days, they kept lobster traps and things like that, and they were all dirt. Um, and there was one at the very end that was a storage area where some older fellows had left work and, stuff had been stored there. And then, um, as the sometimes in a couple years after, other fellows came in and started expanding their studios into the trap shed, but the other side where the Kunitz room and all that is now were coal bins. They were just big open bins, unheated, concrete floors, um, 25-foot ceilings. Um, I had as they asked me to be the chairman of the visual committee, which is these days there's a chairman of there's an overall, fellowship program director, which Terry Kehoe, who's done a really doing a really terrific job. But back then, there was a visual coordinator and there was a visual chairman. The chairman was just a kind of a signature piece, you headed the committee but didn't do anything. The coordinator was both the chairman and the coordinator, took care of all the fellows, the applications, the visiting artists, and so forth. So I did that for 4 years. And some of the slowly but surely, the bins got changed into studios. I had a studio in half of it, and actually Richard Pepitone had built that studio and insulated it, and then we took it and for a studio for the chairman. Paul Bowen had a studio next to me, and then back in those days, when you applied to the work center, you sent in original work. So, I remember from Iowa when I applied, I mailed my stuff in. I couldn't make the trip, so I mailed it in, 2 years, and then so we had applicants from California that were driving their stuff out here in trucks,
Wow.
and we put work all over town. We had it at the Schoolhouse Gallery, we had it at I think we even put some at Berta's Gallery.
How many applicants could you handle? Because nowadays I know there's thousands of applications. I guess it was not the case back then.
No, it wasn't the case back then. We had winnowed them down as well. So the visual committee was the jury back then. And it wasn't till a certain period, and I forget when it was exactly, but it was like the late 70s, early 80s when, we were just starting to get grants from the National Endowment. So the National Endowment looked at our jurying system, said, you can't keep doing this. You can't keep having the same people. So then we started getting outside jurors in combination with the visual committee. So they would come and look at the actual work. So we had some great people, some really terrific artists, Martin Purrier, Elizabeth Murray, just on and on and on. We had great people come in.
Just to link to what you were saying about the facilities earlier, if some of our listeners have not listened to the episode I did with Sharon, the director of the Fine Arts Work Center, she's one of the first episodes you can listen. And in there, we talk about the fact that the Fine Arts Work Center was built on what used to be a lumber yard.
Right.
And all of the buildings are sort of leftovers from the time when it was a lumber yard, and then they were turned into artist studios, and that became the Fine Arts Work Center.
Yeah.
And eventually now it's a big world-class facility that we have now. But it started as a lumber yard. I wanted to know as well, when you were here in the 70s, who were the other fellows that were with you? Are there any fellows that you are still in touch with, or that people that we would know?
Paul Bowen came my second year, and Paul lived in the house that Sharon Poley now occupies, the Hondius house, which was left to the work center. Paul lived there for 20 years or more, and he moved to Vermont. Now, gosh, it's been quite a while. Can't remember exactly when he moved, but Jim Peters and Vicky Tomeko were here later, they, um, they were not here in the early, I can't remember, I think they might have come in 1980 or 79, I'm not sure. Um, my, my ex-wife, Cynthia Huntington, is a poet, a writer. She came in 79, and, John Scoyles, who was one of my close friends, a poet, he was there actually, John was there before me, but we became good friends, and when we met at Yaddo in the residency, and that was in 19 between 1978 and 79 when I went after my first year and then came back after Yaddo. This was a summer residency in Saratoga Springs, uh, came back for my second year. Um, Michael Burkhart, who was a wonderful poet who passed away, about a year and a half ago now. Uh, Visually, there's a guy named David Wheeler who was a sculptor, an amazing artist, so far ahead of his time. David passed away now about 2 years ago. Um, he's never been given his due. He was an extraordinary performance artist, sculptor. He did some of the most amazing things. Um, this was before performance artists, performance art kind of really took off. David just he was extraordinary, and, I don't know if any of his performances had been filmed, maybe snatches of them, but he did things at the art association, he did things on the water, he was extraordinary, so, um, it was a very different, needless to say, very different art world back then, um, but, Chuck McCorkle, again, the guy who showed me the dunes. Chuck is somewhere in Washington, DC. I don't think he's painting anymore. Out of all those fellows that came through in those early days, there's not many left that are still completely engaged as, quote unquote, professional artists, although there are still that are some that are doing it, and staying attached to what happened to them in Provincetown. But those early years were for individuals, even though they were lean economically, um, you could live in Provincetown in the summer. If you were lucky enough and had the resources, you could probably invest in real estate. And a few people did. Um, but I don't think the founders envisioned perhaps the amazing kind of economic change that took place. Um, but their intent, I think, was noble and is um, still meaningful in order to bring people here during the winter, to bring artists, to revive the community in any way they could, and to hopefully have fellows stay and to make a home. And so I think right now maybe there's less than a dozen that are still here in the surrounding area, Provincetown, Truro. Um, but, the alumni, though scattered, I would say, are pretty loyal. We have events, fundraising events, things like that in New York or wherever. Um, People do their best to try to get there and support. I think if you talk to many of our former fellows, a lot whom have become extremely successful and famous. Um, they owe a great deal of their success and their growth to their fellowship years here in Provincetown.
And in the winter here, we have the Winter Fridays at the Fine Arts Work Center,
Right.
where we have a returning fellows who return
Mhm.
to share their work with the public here in Provincetown.
Right.
It's wonderful. If you're in Provincetown in the winter, for November, December, January, February, the first Friday of every month, you can go to the Fine Arts Work Center. They serve you dinner.
Yeah.
And it's delicious most of the time.
Yeah.
And then you have returning fellows talking about their visual work, their literature work, and it's very interesting and engaging. I love going there.
It is. It's a great thing that Sharon helped get off the ground. I think maybe now 2 or 3 years ago that it started. And it's not always just former fellows. There are also visiting artists that maybe have not been fellows, but who are always invited to come to the work center to do studio visits and stay 3 or 4 days. We've got a couple of different programs that are funded by Stephen Pace and Pollock Krasner foundations, which bring in, uh, quote unquote, more mature artists to intermingle with the fellows. And a lot of those people that come back are former fellows that have received that grant. So I think I mean, one of the things that affected me so profoundly um, was being able to meet the members of the visual committee and get to know them. When I first came as a fellow, I was one of the maybe one of the older ones. I was 30, and um, you know, I said, "Oh, I've got a fellowship," and I would look around and I'd see some of these older artists, and I would think, "What are these guys doing here? You know, how come they're not often famous and I'm a fellow?" You know, it was a cocky, egotistical idiot, but fortunately, I stayed around long enough to get to know them and to understand, you know, what they had gone through to continue to do their work and survive as artists in the world. And it was an amazing lesson, you know. Now I'm one of those old guys and, you know, and the fellows come in and they meet me, they come to my studio if they feel like it. Uh, and they're on so many of them are on, you know, career trajectories, you know. They're climbing the ladder as fast as they can. And a lot of them, I think, maybe because the community is so big and diverse and spread out now and the digital world and social media and it's, the whole notion of personal relationships and everything are very, very different. Um, but it's I try to make it a point to meet them, to go into their studios, to see what they're doing because you know, it inspires me. It gives me a lot. And um, I think it's important if you're a young artist to meet every kind of artist that is working, especially in this community because it's so rich and there's so much that it can give you.
You went into the Fine Arts Work Center with a degree in architecture and in photography,
Mhm.
but nowadays you do something quite different. Do you feel like your time at the work center helped to transition your art and what you do?
Oh, absolutely. That you know, subsequent experiences in the world. But no, the work center in Provincetown as a place, is basically it's the root. The foundation of my work, of course, is 5 years of, you know, serious architectural study. I mean, you know, back then, that's all you did. Then when I, quote, unquote, started taking photographs, that just, again, moved me into a different world completely. Then when I came here, boom, the dunes. I was photographing, but I had just started making, um, outdoor pieces and photographing them, but they were very architectural, bricks and sticks and kind of like site plan things, you know? And I was doing this in the cornfields of Iowa. So I came here and I started walking around the dunes. I said, I've got to do something here. I mean, this landscape is so profound and so beautiful. So, and that's when I started, you know, outdoor work with first, first piece I did was I bought Eskimo sled hoops from Marine Specialties. They were about 3.5, 4 feet high, and they were framework for sleds, for dog sleds. They were made out of ash. They were rock hard, but they were these hoops. And I bought like 30 of them. You know, you can get them for $1 or $2. Marine Specialties at that time was a fantastic Army Navy surplus. It's got touristified, you know, over the years, I guess. Bad word, but, um, you know, it still has some pretty funky stuff, but mainly now clothing and things like that. Back then, it was rich with really great stuff. So I based all of my work on that place for, you know, a number of years. Um, but I took those things and I painted them white, painted them black, I painted them black and white with stripes. And I did, pieces out in the dunes with them on the beautiful sloping dunes. Uh, they look like croquet sets for a Jolly Green Giant. If you take photographs of them, change the scale. So, It was great, but then I said, "Wait a second, this place doesn't need anything artificial, at least for me," and so I started working with just natural materials, with sticks, with, young pine trees that had fallen over because they lacked enough light. They were clustered in the pine forest, and so I would take these 15, 20-foot sticks and break off the branches. They had fallen down. They were and I'd stack them up, and I started using them in different structures.
Welcome back. Just a reminder, if you would like to follow us on Instagram, our Instagram account is at the Art Colony Podcast. And also, if you want to help us out and give us a little tip and sponsor us, you can go to buymeacoffee.com, look for the Art Colony Podcast, and leave us a little tip. And I would like to thank Chip, Marcy, and also Tom, who's a repeat donor, for helping us. Thank you very much. So, Bert, how would you describe the work you're doing now?
I think it's kind of like, narrative expressionism. Um, I started out, again, in photography, but then when I started doing more drawing and so forth, um, it came out of kind of life drawing in graduate school, but it ended up becoming abstract. Um, and I was collaging photographs, I was doing photo silk screens, I was doing a lot of different stuff in graduate school and out of graduate school. But then when I started painting, um, and I started when I started doing work outdoors, I would go out and I would draw what I had done. I would draw in the sights. I would draw, and most of it, in fact, all of it was abstract, but it was based uh, on the structures and the sculptures and the pieces that I had been making. And then so I worked abstractly for a long time, and then in the mid '90s, there was all kinds of stuff going on in my life, and so I felt that I needed to express more emotionally, so I started doing more figurative stuff, a lot of self-portraiture, things like that, working with figure and then embedding the figure in abstraction, and that evolved to, um and then one of the things that was the most profound is I got a Fulbright grant to go to Nigeria to study, Yoruba carving, because I had wanted to begin to work indoors, and I thought, um, I just didn't want to take sticks and put them in a white gallery space. I just didn't think that it made sense in a certain way for me, so, I thought, "Go to the root," and the root would be, how do I start changing the material and by carving and manipulating? So, I spent an amazing year in Nigeria, West Africa, was able to travel to Ivory Coast, uh, go to, um, Amsterdam to see museums, go to, the UK, to London to see museums, which, of course, had, um, taken away an amazing amount of art and sculpture and pieces from the colonies, and so that I mean, I was able to make things and study carving, and at the same time, I did a lot of painting and drawing on paper, and I just let everything that was there come in. I didn't try to edit anything, color, ritual, everything. I just threw it all in there, and it was a fantastic experience. So when I came back, um, Jack Twerkoff had passed away, and my ex-wife and I were very, very close with Wally Twerkoff, and she was still living in the house, and she said, "Would you like the house for a year, when you come back?" And so I lived in Jack's house and worked in his studio, um, and it was a wonderful experience, um, and again, I went to Marine Specialties, and I found grommeted canvas panels, which were old United States Navy bunk covers. And they were at that time, they were stacked to the ceiling, and they had a warehouse out on Route 6 that had thousands of them stacked to the ceiling. And, so I bought a whole bunch of them. They were like $2, 2.50 a piece. Um, and I started working on them, and then my ex-wife got a job at UC Irvine in California. So we packed up and went all the way across the country, and I got, stupidly at the time, but I thought that this is great, we're gonna be swimming in it. She's got a high-paying job. She was pregnant when her son was born in California, and I got a 1,400 square foot studio in an industrial complex, which is not too dissimilar to where I'm
I was about
working.
to say, you have the same situation now.
Exactly. But this was a huge complex in Huntington Beach, California, Surf City. On one side of me were surfboard men, guys that made surfboards. On another was a printing company. The place was filled with surfboard makers. Um, but it was great. Um, and I was able to work on these big, big paintings. I could work on one painting that would be 6 feet tall and maybe 20 inches wide, which was the same size as one of the grommeted canvas panels. But all of them had been through everything, been through the wars, been washed. They had graffiti on them and all kinds of stuff. And a lot of them had shrunk there. So there were different sizes. But I could make a 14-foot painting or a 6-foot painting. So I made a whole bunch of those paintings, and they were embedded with the things that I had absorbed from Africa, as well as the language that I had gained, living and working in the dunes in Provincetown. And so that has continued to build in the work, the early figurative work, all that kind of stuff. And then the 40 or more years that I've spent going out into the dunes, but also going to Herring Cove and Hatches Harbor. When I would come here in the summers, um, my ex and I were kind of like den mothers at the work center during their summer workshop program. So I would bike out to Herring Cove and then walk to Hatches Harbor and stay there for 4 or 5 hours and draw. So I've done thousands of drawings out there, which is absorbing that language. And all of that kind of calligraphy of the water and the sand, and then I've had a long interest in calligraphy as well. And, I was able to go to Japan a couple times for work and things like that. And then, when in 2014, I made my first trip to Italy, and that's where you're able to see for at least I was, for the first time, actual work that you've been looking at in books and magazines forever, right? So Italy just blew me away. Um, the color, the frescoes, the texture, surfaces. Um, and so I've been to Italy 4 times. And the last time was when I retired from academia. I got this beautiful fellowship to a place called Civitella Ranieri in Umbria. It was 6 weeks living in a 15th century castle. Um, and we went on different trips to different sites, some of which I'd already been to. Then I went to Pompeii for about 8 or 9 days. Pompeii and Herculaneum, and a day in Naples, seeing museums. I mean, that is just Pompeii was just wow. I mean, and so all of that is then the work, and I keep, kind of mashing it together and see where it goes. And it's just kind of comes, it comes out of all that. And everything kind of starts with liquid. Uh, and I build from that. I have sketches and ideas, but I try not to cling to them too much and let the process lead the work. Um, I've just been asked to do a mural this year on the wharf, and that's going to be interesting. I was like, oh boy, 7 feet by 20 feet. That's going to be a challenge, and I'm excited about it. And hope I don't screw it up.
Or you won't.
There's always the chance. That's the thing. The latest painting I did started out as almost as a disaster, and I think I was able to, salvage it. But oftentimes, I just try. I want to keep that experimentation open, keep it loose, and make it fun. But when you screw something up, it's not fun. You got, oh God, how do I? How can I get this back? How can I move it? And so, fortunately, I'm hoping that'll work, with this monster.
You talked a bit, actually quite a bit about drawing from life
Mhm,
and doing sketches.
mhm,
However, when I think of your work and when I look at your work online, what I see is very abstract.
mhm.
So is that a newer evolution of your work, or is that something that um, is not abstract, but we just see it as abstract?
What I've kind of been engaged in for maybe now the last, well, close to a decade, uh, has been this fixation on this form, which is mountain-like, uh, figure-like. It's like a substitute proxy for a lot of things, and a lot of it comes from looking at, uh, medieval landscapes, um, and there's one Italian artist in particular, Giovanni di Paolo, whose work just is amazing, and there's like 14 of his paintings in the Lehman collection at, um, at the Met. And there's one that's called The Creation of the World and the Expulsion of Adam and Eve from the Garden. And it's a small painting, but it's just spectacular. But the way he depicts and the way that medieval artists depict the mountains, this kind of strange graphic representation, just fascinating. I just loved it. And somehow it comes bouncing out of architecture. And so I've been playing with that. And then, of course, this environment, and the language, once again, that language and the calligraphy of it, and so all of that has just been kind of moved around. So like I said at the beginning, it's like this kind of narrative expressionism. For me, there's a story in it, but I can't expect, the viewer to find that. I hope that they find the images at least compelling enough to look at.
And you showed me a painting last week where you had used bleach also to paint with. And I was really impressed by your innovation in terms of using materials.
Mhm.
You know, it was not just paint. You were telling me about all these special dyes and inks you were using. And then you said, I made these marks with bleach.
Mhm.
I thought that was very interesting. Can you talk more about the materials you use?
Yeah, well, I've kind of gone back to the grommeted canvas panels, but on a much bigger scale and making them myself, basically. So most of the paintings are 6 feet by 5 feet, and as a base on the majority of them, I soak or brush on, but soak them all completely with this reactive dye, which are fabric dyes that are very, very intense. You dilute them 4 to 1 to get an incredibly strong color. So you can dilute them more to get washes and so forth. And so I start working on the floor and have to coat the entire canvas completely because if you don't, the parts that aren't coated will shrink. So in order to get it to stay even and so forth. And then I build up with dyes and I can work with acrylic and flash and all different types of media, ink. I can draw on it, do whatever. Um, but I thought I tried putting heavy layers of dye to get a really intense coat. And then I said, well, what if I try to use some bleach to get back to the ground and to take away? And depending upon how much dye you have, depending upon how much, if I've used acrylic wash as a ground, that's got plastic in it. So if I put bleach on top of that, or if I put the dye on top of that and then bleach it, I'll get the color. The bleach won't go through that light plastic wash. So I'll get color. So depending upon what I do, I can get different things. But the only problem with the bleach is I got to wear a mask, and it drives you nuts. So I try to do that at the end of the day when I'm leaving, and I put a fan on and all that. And I'm hoping like I can do more of it in the summer when I take it out. I've only been doing it a couple of years and in a minor way. So if I got bigger and started splashing a lot of it around, I'd really have to be much more careful in terms of breathing.
Well, when I went to visit your studio, I thought it was very impressive. your use of materials. I just use paint, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden you're using all these things that I had never thought of.
Yeah.
And speaking of your studio,
Mm.
this episode's going to be on April 6th.
Cool.
And the Provincetown Art Association and Museum is organizing a studio visit to your space on April 12th.
Right. Yeah.
So if our listeners, if you are members of the PAAM, the Provincetown Art Association and Museum,
Yeah.
and you would like to go visit Bert in his studio, you can sign up online on their website for April 12th. And believe me, it's worth it. It's a big, beautiful studio full of treasures and marvels.
Well, I appreciate
Am I
it.
right, Bert?
Well, I hope so. I'm glad you think that. I appreciate that. But it's a big space, and depending upon how many I can clear out a little. But boy, I'm jammed. I mean, it's filled to the brim. And I think we are so fortunate in this community, to have a place like PAM, the Work Center, Castle Hill, the Commons. It's an incredibly rich place. We're really, really fortunate. And I think, again, thank you for what you're doing with this podcast and bringing in all these, incredibly diverse people.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Yeah.
And the PAM did one of their studio visits in my studio/gallery in
Right.
early February. And it was one of those days when we had a big snowstorm, but still I had a nice group come in and we talked about my work, and it was great. So if you're interested, please sign up for that.
Yeah. Outstanding. Yeah, please do.
When I was visiting your studio, Bert, you told me a very interesting story. You told me that for 3 summers in a row, you lived in a dune shack. Can you tell us those stories?
True. Yeah, we were, again, my ex-wife and I, we were incredibly fortunate. I knew Hazel Hawthorne Werner, who owned and ran Euphoria and Thalassa.
Which are names of dune shacks.
Right. They're now under the auspices of the Beacon Hill Trust. And Hazel was just an extraordinary woman, unbelievable woman. And she ran these shacks. She rented them out to artists and writers and people in P-Town. She had done this for many, many years. And I got to know her after staying in for a brief time in Thalassa, a small shack, which sat right on the edge of the foredune, pretty much, at that time. And then my ex-wife, Cynthia, and I went to visit Hazel one day, and she had been ill. She had an illness that prevented her from being able to go back out to the dunes and so forth. And she said, I don't think I can run the dune shack this summer. Would you all like to live out there? And we said, yeah. So it ended up being 3 summers that she was just unable to do them and couldn't run the quote unquote business. And Euphoria it's like living in a boat. It was wonderful. 2 bunk beds, propane refrigerator, a 2-burner propane. And you were off of the foredune. You walked through some beach grass and down to the water. You woke up every morning, you looked at the Atlantic. You had an outhouse and a pump, and which I think is still pretty much the same.
Mhm.
The outhouses are a little different. Back then, you used lime, so we had to dig out the outhouse, carry it back in, all that kind of stuff. That was intense.
So you would physically carry the
Garbage bags.
the outhouse material
Yeah.
to the highway.
And to the nearest dumpster.
So that's a walk of how many hours in the dunes?
Well, it wasn't an hour walk, but it was, half hour maybe. But I was young. I mean, and I was in really great shape, and I got in better shape because of that. Plus, the pump for the water, and we'd fill up about 8 gallons, gallon jugs, was down at the bottom of a very steep sand walk. Of course, right there, and you take 4 gallons of that, and you do it 3 or 4 times a day, and then you do that for 5, 6 months, because we stayed out there. Sometimes we would go out there in late April or early May and stay almost till October. And yeah, it was just extraordinary. We had Cynthia wrote a really wonderful book called The Salt House, and she spent 10 years putting that book together. Um, and it's basically Thoreau takes a spouse to the dunes type of book. It's the living in an amazing environment and reflecting on it, and then talking about our marriage because we got married um, in 1980, in the year that we went out there. And so she compressed 3 summers into one. And it's terrific. She's a great writer. And fortunately, we are friends. We are good friends.
Good.
And yeah, we have a son.
So you're in the dunes for 5, 6 months, for
Yeah.
3 years.
Mhm.
What's your daily rhythm like?
Well, you get up with the sun and you go to bed with the sun, right? You can't avoid it. There's just, even if you want to, unless you want to put curtains over the windows, which we didn't do. Um, and you your first few weeks out there, you have the dune hunger because you're always moving and you're moving through sand. Um, and so I did outdoor work. I was working, I mean, it was heaven. And I would, and on rainy days, and there were plenty, and storms and stuff, I'd work inside on, a tiny little piece. And Cynthia was always writing. Um, and so, and then we took incredibly long walks. We would walk, um, the race point and back and forth in the Herring Cove. And we'd, go through these little villages of RVs that used to be able to go out there and camp and stuff like that. Um, no, it was incredible. And, then we had the terns that would be nesting out there and they'd be dive bombing because we had a path that walked right through them uh, to the dunes, to the water, excuse me. And, friends came out. We told everybody came out, bring food, bring beer, whatever, but always bring something. And, we had solstice celebrations and all kinds of stuff. And, but we'd get up and have a breakfast and then either decide to take a walk or go down and go swimming or say we're going to work this morning when it's cool, then go swimming in the afternoon, you know. And I'm not a big swimmer, but I just get in the water and just love I mean, I grew up in Miami, for God's sake. So just being in the water. I'm not a big boater or anything like that, but just being in it.
And back then, you didn't have to worry too much about sharks.
Not about sharks and not about ticks.
Oh, true. Yeah.
And that was our savior. I mean, you go out there now, if you go anywhere, especially, I mean, I worked out in the dunes. Even back then, I was working in cranberry bogs and doing pieces in bogs and all kinds of stuff. You can't do that now. You simply can't. It's incredibly dangerous. Although I saw last night there's a new vaccine for Lyme disease
Oh, that would be
that
good.
they have thinking it's 73% effective. So it's not on the market yet, but yeah. But still, that doesn't protect you from all the other things that the ticks do. And I've had both Lyme disease and babiosis, and fortunately got them, caught them in time.
Mhm.
So I hope hope it hasn't done any damage because you don't know.
Yeah, and it is a limiting factor for
Yeah.
me. I absolutely adore being in nature,
Yeah,
but one of the reasons I love going to dunes is because I'm on sand.
Yeah.
And I love walking around there, but walking in the forest, I'm always thinking about ticks.
if you protect yourself well enough, if you're smart enough to think about it, and then once you get out of the dunes, you just examine and have somebody examine you really carefully because those guys will get anywhere and they love the dark, damp places of the human body. Yeah, it's a pain.
Yeah.
But I was lucky. Those were the tick-free years,
Mhm.
and so it's a whole different freedom of being able to be out there with, stress-free.
So when you're living in the dunes, how do you get your groceries?
We took our outhouse with us, dumped them, and went to the store, and then put them in our backpacks and carried stuff back out. And normally we'd stay in town, maybe we'd visit friends and have a shower. And there were nights when we would would walk back across in altered states, through fog. And sometimes we had markers that we knew, where we were. Um, and but often there were a few times when we crawled, just because of the weather. and whatever dumbass decision we made, to go back that night, but we always made it.
And you said your son was with you during those years?
Our son came later.
Okay.
Our son came after the Peaked Hill Trust took over the dunes. We stayed in Euphoria several times, for a couple. This was just like we were regular dune people then, like everybody flying. And we stayed in Margot Gelb. And our son, he loved it. We thought, God, is he going to be bored? He was amazing. He just loved it. So he grew up out there and at the work center. Now he's in Taiwan, so a whole different world, but he's created a really great world for himself. He's a stand-up comic, part owner of a comedy club, and he's also an administrator at a cram school, which is the schools that kids go to after school so they can learn, quote unquote, perfect English. So he's living a great life, travels all over the place. It's quite wonderful. Really proud of him.
So, Bert, nowadays in 2026, what's your daily rhythm now?
It's reasonably mellow. And the summer will pick up because not only do I show at Burt Walker Gallery, but I work for Burt. So if I do all the installations there. So if there's a show, I'm up and there and installing. Generally, depending upon what the show is, it takes 2 or 3 days to install a show. Burt works with Grace Hopkins and curates the show. They do a great job together. They're really funny to watch. And sometimes I get sucked into it, but I try to, just put it up. You tell me where you want it. But then Burt and I will work she'll work on my show together. I'm going to show in July. And anything that needs to be done, a painting hauled away or taken from her place, or go out to Rezika's studio and get something because we always have a lot of Paul's work coming in and out, and Bob Henry and people like that. And if I'm not working at the gallery, depending upon what I have to do, I take it easy in the morning. I get to the studio around 10 or something like that. Just start roaming the studio. I have computer stuff to do, but I try to break it up and I try to get some exercise as best as possible. This summer, I think I play golf early in the morning with my good friend Jerome Green and Tim Barnard. And when he's in town, Bob Bailey. They dragged my butt out there 4 or 5 years ago, and I'd never played golf. I always made fun of it. But like during COVID, it was a godsend. I mean, and it's just like 4 or 5-year-olds playing in a golf course. We have a great time.
Well, Jerome is a fun guy.
He is. Jerome is, he's the man. He gets it done. He's got incredible skills. Wonderful painter. His mural down on the wharf is terrific. His sketchbooks are beautiful. Just terrific sketchbooks.
Yeah, we'll get Jerome Green on the podcast eventually. I've already asked him, so he's going to be coming eventually.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, because he's embedded. Yeah, it's great.
In your big, beautiful studio, I was so jealous when I visited that space.
Yeah.
Do you tend to work in silence, or do you have music on? What's the atmosphere in the studio?
It's back and forth, but mainly I have AirPods because, like, guys next door to me is Towboats Are Us. And so sometimes they're making noise. On the other side of me is the guys from Provincetown Brewery. Sometimes they're moving stuff, but I've had noisier neighbors, and it's a light industrial complex, so there's noise. So the AirPods are great, and then sometimes just silence, depending upon it. In the summer, I can open the front door. I don't open my garage door because I've got so much stuff. And if it's windy at all, things are blowing because I work so much on the floor. I'll just wander back and forth. I have like stations that I'm doing various things. And then, once a particular work gets to a point, I can put it up on the wall. I can work on the walls. But a lot of time I'm on my knees. It's like the yoga of painting.
Yeah. So you already mentioned that we can see your work at the Burt Walker Gallery.
Mm-hmm.
Where else can our listeners go to see your work?
Well, I have a show opening this coming Sunday at the Wellfleet Community Center out on Old Kings Highway. It's going to open on Sunday from 3 to 5, I believe. It's like a multi-purpose space that's in the senior center. So I'll have about 8 pieces. It's a small show. It's curated by Bob Rendler, he's put together an amazing program. He's had almost 80 exhibitions out there. So all kinds of folks have shown. So I'm happy to have a show anywhere. So I'll be showing there, and then at Berta's.
And what's your Instagram account?
It's at Buryar, at Beryar.
Beryar.
Yeah.
Buryar.
Buryar.
And your website?
I don't have one.
Okay. Well, we'll just go to at Buryar on Instagram.
Instagram is it.
That's where you can find Burt Yarborough's work.
Yeah.
Now, before we go, we have to do our speed round.
All right.
It's the most important part of the interview.
God, I hope my brain can catch up.
Oh, don't worry. It's easy. So, first question. This is based on all of the wonderful residencies and fellowships that you mentioned earlier. If you would have to go back, Nigeria or Italy?
Oh, wow. I'd probably go to Italy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely, I think, at this point.
Mm-hmm.
But, yeah, it's tough. It's a tough choice. But Italy, a little easier.
Yeah, definitely. What do you prefer to do? Painting or printing?
Painting.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Because I got to know you through printing.
Right.
And in my head, you were a printer, but I've discovered as I've gotten to know you over the last few years that you're also much more of a painter.
But I print like a painter. I mean, I use, I'm the Michael Mazer school of printmaking. Michael was, quote unquote, my teacher. And he, was a painter. And he had just amazing facility and understanding of what the print medium could do. And so I taught it that way. But there's room for every possibility in printmaking. It's an incredible way to make work.
Texting or calling?
Probably texting these days,
depending
upon what it is. If I really want to talk to somebody, calling for sure. But texting is just, I goof when I text and I goof when I email. If I'm going to do this stuff, I'm going to have fun doing it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll throw in a stupid emoji or a picture or anything. There's some people that are purists to think if you use an emoji, you're like an idiot or you're this or that. And I just goof when I do it.
Well, the emoji is there to clarify the emotion behind the sentence.
Yeah. Supposedly, but I just throw in anything sometimes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm at the point where if people call me, I'm thinking, what are you doing?
Exactly.
This could be a text. If you had a superpower, would you prefer to fly or to breathe underwater?
Oh, well, fly.
Yeah?
Yeah. I've had some interesting flying dreams, especially when I was in Africa taking the medication for malaria. I was taking this Aralin, I think was the name. You had to take it. Man, it gave me some of the strangest dreams. Whoa. And they were like psychedelic. And the flying dreams were really amazing. So I've had some, it would be great to breathe underwater for sure, but flying would be amazing. Yeah.
I had a lot of flying dreams for a long time in my life. And it was also, I was consciously dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
I would find myself saying, oh, I'm in a dream now. I can fly.
Yeah, exactly.
And I would start taking off and flying in my dream. I don't have those anymore. I wish they'd come back.
Tabitha Vevers did a whole series of paintings based on flying dreams.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, she asked people for their dreams, and then she painted it, quasi-illustrated, and then wrote some of the dreams. She has a whole body of those things.
Okay, Tabitha Vevers, I sent you a message on Instagram. Please get back to me. I'd love to have you on my podcast.
Yeah, she's got a whole nother history.
Uh-huh.
Her dad, her mom, she and her sister. I mean, yeah, it's a fascinating history. It's a whole nother world.
Well, we'll have her on the podcast soon, I am sure. So now we're going to have the last question, and this is the most important, most serious question. French fries or onion rings?
French fries.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
You're a traditionalist?
Basically. It depends, though, a lot on where the onion rings might be coming from. They have great onion rings at Finizzi's, and they have great onion rings at the Knack.
Where's that?
The Knack in Orleans.
In Orleans, okay.
One of the fantastic burgers. but really, really good onion. Real thin, the real thin ones that are breaded, delicious. Yeah. So when I go there and get a burger, I get onion rings.
Uh-huh.
But the rest of the time,
French fries.
French fries. Yeah.
Okay, well, now we know all your secrets. Well, Burt Yarborough, this has been a fantastic interview. I've been so happy to have you in my studio.
Thanks for having me.
And just to remind our listeners, at Buryar, Beryar on Instagram. And also, don't forget, on April 12th, if you're a member of the Provincetown Art Association and Museum, you can go to a visit at Bert's studio by signing up on their website. And I highly recommend it.
Excellent.
Thank you very much.
Gaston.
And thank you all for joining us. Have a great day.